My parents skipped my birthday dinner and texted, "You are not our priority right now." I left a note on the bill that said, "Then do not expect me to be yours." So I stopped paying the mortgage on the house they were living in. The next morning, I woke up to 79 missed calls. I did not just cut them off. I foreclosed on them during my brother's engagement party. My name is Sophia, and at 32 years old, I am a forensic accountant in Atlanta. That means I get paid a lot of money to find hidden assets and expose financial lies. But for my entire life, the biggest lie I ever scrutinized was the love of my own parents. Last night, I sat alone at a corner table in the Capitol Grill in Buckhead. It was my birthday. The waiter had already poured me a glass of vintage Cabernet and placed 3 empty menus on the table. I checked my watch. 7:30. They were 30 minutes late. This was typical. My father David and my mother Clara were never late for church or for my brother Marcus's little league games back in the day. But for me, time was always a suggestion. I watched the door hoping to see them walk in. Instead, my phone buzzed against the white tablecloth. It was a text from my mother. I unlocked the screen and read the words that would finally break the camel's back. The text read, "Sophia, we cannot make it. Brittany broke a nail and is having a panic attack about the engagement photos tomorrow. We have to take her to the emergency spa appointment. You are not our priority right now. Order something nice, and we will pay you back later." I stared at the screen. Brittany. My brother's 26-year-old fiancée. A woman who once asked me if I was the maid because I was cleaning up after Thanksgiving dinner while she sat on the couch. My parents had bailed on their daughter's birthday dinner because Brittany broke a manicured fingernail. I did not cry. Tears are for people who do not have leverage. I felt a cold calm wash over me, the kind of calm I feel when I find a discrepancy in a corporate ledger. I looked around the restaurant, the golden lighting, the happy families toasting at other tables. I was the woman in the expensive suit sitting alone with 3 menus. The waiter approached me looking uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and asked, "Should I give them a few more minutes, ma'am?" I looked him in the eye and smiled a smile that did not reach my eyes. "No. You can take the other settings away. It is just me tonight." As he removed the plates, I opened my banking app. It was a Chase private client account. I scrolled down to the recurring transfers. There it was, $4,500, labeled Mom and Dad's house. For 5 years, I had paid every single dime of the mortgage on the 4-bedroom brick house in the suburbs. They told everyone Marcus was a genius investor who bought it for them. They told everyone I was just a stingy accountant who lived in a condo downtown because I was selfish. But the deed was in the name of Nemesis Holdings, LLC. And I was the sole owner of Nemesis Holdings. I tapped the transfer that was scheduled for tomorrow morning, the 1st of the month. The screen asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" I thought about the times my mother told me Marcus needed new shoes, so I had to wear my cousin's hand-me-downs. I thought about the text, "You are not our priority right now." I pressed confirm, canceled. Then I ordered the most expensive steak on the menu and a bottle of champagne. I ate alone. I enjoyed every bite. When the bill came, I pulled out my black Amex. I paid for my meal. Then on the back of the merchant copy receipt intended for my parents, if they ever asked why I flipped the script, I took my Mont Blanc pen and wrote in my neatest cursive handwriting, "Since I am not your priority, neither is your housing." Or, "Good luck with the mortgage. Brittany can pay it with her nail polish money." I took a photo of the note. I took a photo of the canceled transfer screen. I opened the family group chat, which included Mom, Dad, Marcus, and Brittany. I sent both photos. Then I did the most satisfying thing of all. I went to settings and blocked every single one of them. I did not go home to my condo. I knew they would come pounding on my door the second they saw the message. Instead, I signaled the waiter and asked for the check to be wrapped up. I walked out of the restaurant and hailed an Uber Black. Destination Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. I had a bag packed in my trunk. I always kept a go bag ready for work emergencies, but this was a personal emergency. I bought a first-class ticket to St. Lucia on the next flight out. As I sat in the Delta Sky Club sipping another glass of champagne, I looked at my phone one last time before turning on airplane mode. The preview notifications were already flooding in. Mom, call me right now, Sophia. Dad, you ungrateful little brat, pick up the phone. Marcus, are you insane? Brittany is crying, you ruined everything. I swiped the power off button. The screen went black. For the first time in 32 years, the silence was not lonely. It was expensive, it was luxurious, and it was mine. They thought the mortgage was the only thing I controlled. They had no idea that the house they were sleeping in, the car Marcus drove, and even the insurance policy on my father's life were all tied to my bank accounts. They wanted to play favorites. Fine. I was about to show them exactly what happens when the Bank of Sophia closes for business. I boarded the plane and settled into the leather seat. The flight attendant asked if I was traveling for business or pleasure. I looked out the window as the plane began to taxi away from Atlanta, away from the toxicity and away from the family that treated me like an ATM machine. I smiled and said, "Pleasure, pure pleasure. I am celebrating a very late birthday present to myself, freedom." By the time I land tomorrow morning, the bank will send the first delinquency notice to their email. By next week, the foreclosure process begins. And by the time I come back for the wedding, well, let's just say the engagement party is going to be a lot more exciting than they planned. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the engine lull me to sleep. I slept like a baby who just saved $4,500 a month. But the real storm was waiting for me when I turned my phone back on in the Caribbean. 79 missed calls was just the beginning. They had involved the police. And that was their second mistake, because involving the law meant involving facts. And the facts were entirely on my side. In the next part, I will tell you how my sister-in-law tried to break into my office to find the deed to the house and how she accidentally handed me the weapon I needed to destroy her. The morning sun in St. Lucia hits differently than the fluorescent lights of my office in Atlanta. It feels like permission. Permission to breathe, permission to exist, and permission to finally stop carrying the weight of 3 grown adults on my back. I rolled over in the king-sized bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets cool against my skin, and reached for my phone on the nightstand. I expected a few angry texts. I did not expect a digital avalanche. 79 missed calls, 112 text messages, 14 voicemails. Most people would panic seeing that kind of activity. They would assume there was a death in the family or a natural disaster. But I am a forensic accountant. I look for patterns. And the pattern here was obvious. The timestamps told the entire story of their morning minute by desperate minute. The first cluster of calls came in at 9:30 in the morning. That would be exactly when the receptionist at the Emerald Day Spa in Buckhead swiped the Platinum American Express card I had given my mother as an emergency authorized user card. She used to tell me emergencies were things like a flat tire or a burst pipe. Apparently, Brittany needing a diamond dust facial before her engagement photos now qualified as a crisis. I pressed play on the first voicemail. It was my mother. Her voice was an octave higher than usual, a tone she reserved for when she was trying to intimidate retail workers. "Sophia, pick up the phone immediately. We are at the counter and the card is declining. The girl says it has been reported lost or stolen. Call the bank right now and fix this. Brittany is crying in the lobby. You are embarrassing us." I took a sip of the fresh papaya juice the butler had left on the terrace table and scrolled to the next message. It was 10 minutes later. This time it was my father. "Your mother is upset, Sophia. You know she has high blood pressure. I do not know what game you are playing, but you need to transfer $5,000 to your brother's account instantly. We had to use the rent money to pay for the spa because they threatened to call security. Fix this. I laughed out loud. The sound startled a small bird perched on the railing. They used the rent money. The rent money for a house they did not own, which was due to be paid to me, their landlord, who they had just insulted. The irony was so rich, it could have paid off the national debt. But the real entertainment was the security alert I received from my office building back in Atlanta. My firm handles high-profile audits for Fortune 500 companies. We have security protocols that rival the Pentagon. You cannot just walk in even if you think you are God's gift to the world like my brother Marcus does. I opened the security app on my iPad and pulled up the archived footage from the lobby camera. It was time-stamped 11:15 in the morning. There he was, Marcus, wearing a suit that I knew I had paid for storming up to the front desk. I could not hear the audio, but I could read his body language perfectly. He was slamming his hand on the marble counter. He was pointing at the elevator. He was demanding to see me. I watched as Jerome, our head of security, stepped into the frame. Jerome is a former linebacker who does not have time for entitlement. I watched Marcus poke Jerome in the chest. That was a mistake. In a smooth motion that was almost beautiful to watch, Jerome grabbed my brother by the back of his expensive suit jacket and the seat of his pants. He marched him toward the revolving doors. Marcus was kicking and flailing his mouth open in what I assumed were screams of, "I know your boss." He did not know the boss. I was the boss. And I was currently applying sunscreen to my legs 2,000 miles away. I switched back to the voicemails. There was one from Marcus recorded presumably right after he was tossed onto the sidewalk. "You think you are funny, Sophia? You think you can just cut us off? I went to your office to give you a chance to apologize. Do not think you are special just because you crunch numbers. Mom is losing it. She says if you do not send the money for the photographer deposit by noon, she is going to take drastic measures. You are ruining my engagement week. You are selfish. You have always been jealous of me because I am the one getting married, and you are just a lonely workaholic." Jealous. That was their favorite word. They thought I worked 80-hour weeks because I had no life. They never understood that I worked those hours so I could build a fortress of financial independence they could never touch. Until yesterday, I had let them live inside that fortress rent-free. Now I was pulling up the drawbridge. I spent the afternoon at the infinity pool. I ordered lobster tacos and another bottle of champagne. I tipped the staff generously. It felt good to spend money on people who actually said thank you. But as the sun began to set, painting the Caribbean sky in violent shades of purple and orange, one last voicemail came through. It was from my mother again. Her voice was different this time. It was cold. It was the voice she used when I was a teenager, and I got an A- instead of an A+. It was the voice of a woman who believed she owned me. "Sophia, this has gone on long enough. You are not at your apartment. Marcus went there and the doorman said you left with a suitcase. You are running away from your responsibilities. Listen to me clearly. If you do not call me back within the hour and unlock the credit cards, I am going to call the police. I will tell them you are having a mental breakdown and you are a danger to yourself. I will have them put a psychiatric hold on you. And then, as your next of kin, I will take power of attorney and unfreeze those accounts myself. You have 1 hour." I stared at the phone. My hand did not shake. My heart did not race. Instead, a slow, cold smile spread across my face. My mother Clara watched too many soap operas. She thought a power of attorney was something you could just grab like a loaf of bread at the grocery store. She thought the police were her personal customer service agents. She had no idea that by leaving that voicemail, she had just handed me the most valuable thing in a legal battle: evidence of extortion. She was threatening to file a false police report to gain access to my finances. In the state of Georgia, that was a felony. I saved the voicemail. I backed it up to the cloud. Then I emailed a copy to my lawyer, Harrison. Harrison charges $600 an hour, and he hates my family almost as much as I do. I typed a simple subject line: "The Eagle has landed. Proceed with Phase 2. Phase 2 was not just cutting off the credit cards. Phase 2 was the house. They thought the foreclosure notice was a glitch. They thought the eviction warning was a prank. They were about to find out that while they were playing checkers, I had been mastering three-dimensional chess for a decade. I put the phone down and looked at the ocean. Let them call the police. Let them try to find me. By the time they realize what is actually happening, the locks on the doors will already be changed. My mother wanted to make me a priority. Fine. She was about to become my #1 project, and unlike her, I always finished my work. But there was one variable I had not calculated. Brittany. While my parents were barking threats, my future sister-in-law was doing something much more quiet and much more dangerous. She wasn't trying to call me, she was trying to become me. And she was currently inside my parents' house logging onto the family computer, guessing the answers to my security questions. She knew the name of my first pet. She knew the street I grew up on. And she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. My flight landed in Atlanta at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I did not go straight to my penthouse condo in Midtown. Instead, I told the driver to head to the suburbs to the 4-bedroom colonial house on Maplewood Drive. The house that everyone believed belonged to David and Clara Jenkins, but was actually the primary asset of Nemesis Holdings, LLC. I needed to stop by for one reason. In the safe in my old bedroom, which was now supposedly a guest room, but really just a storage unit for Marcus's failed hobbies, I kept a hard drive. That drive contained digital copies of every financial transaction I had made for this family over the last decade. If I was going to war, I needed my ammunition. I expected the house to be empty. My father usually spent Tuesdays pretending to golf at a club he could no longer afford, and my mother spent her afternoons at church gossiping under the guise of prayer. Marcus, I assumed, would be out pretending to be a CEO. I was wrong. As I unlocked the front door with my key, a key my mother had demanded I return months ago, but never did, I felt the air in the house shift. It was heavy, stale. The living room blinds were drawn, casting the space in a dim, suffocating shadow. They were waiting for me. It looked like a staged intervention from a bad reality TV show. My father was sitting in his armchair with his arms crossed. My mother was on the sofa clutching a tissue she did not need. Marcus was pacing by the fireplace. And sitting right in the center on the ottoman was Brittany. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes scanning my outfit. I was wearing a linen suit from St. Lucia and carrying a limited edition Hermes bag. I saw a flicker of envy in her eyes before she masked it with a look of exaggerated concern. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Brittany said. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but it had an edge like a razor blade. "We were worried sick, Sophia. Mom was about to call the hospitals." I did not break my stride. I walked past them toward the stairs. "I am just here to get some files. I will be out of your hair in 5 minutes." Marcus stepped in front of the stairs, blocking my path. He tried to look menacing, but he was wearing sweatpants at 2 in the afternoon on a workday. "You are not going anywhere," he said. "We need to talk about your attitude. You humiliated Brittany. You humiliated Mom and Dad. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was for them to have their card declined?" I looked at him. "Move, Marcus." "I am serious, Sophia," he shouted. "You think because you have a little corporate job you are better than us? You think you can control us with money?" My mother stood up then. Her voice was trembling with that fake theatrical sadness she had perfected over 30 years. "Sophia, we are a family. The Bible says honor your father and your mother. What you did was cruel. You left us stranded, you abandoned us. And for what? Because we had a medical emergency with Brittany." "A broken nail is not a medical emergency," I said calmly. "And theft is not a family value." "Theft!" My father boomed, standing up to join the wall of disapproval. "How dare you accuse us of theft? We raised you. We put a roof over your head." I almost laughed. That was the opening I needed. "You put a roof over my head?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than their shouting. "Let us talk about this roof, Dad. Let us talk about this floor, these walls." Do you actually remember who signed the closing documents on this house 5 years ago? My father's face turned a shade of purple. I had only seen on bruised fruit. I bought this house. He lied. He looked straight at Brittany and lied. I let you handle the paperwork because I was busy with business, but this is my house. I paid the down payment. I looked at Brittany. She was smirking, completely buying into their delusion. Yeah, Sophia. Brittany chimed in, crossing her legs. Everyone knows Marcus made a huge investment from his crypto earnings to help Dad buy this place. You just rent a condo downtown. We are the ones building equity here. That is why I am turning your old room into a yoga studio. We need to upgrade the energy in this house. The delusion was breathtaking. Marcus had told Brittany he helped buy the house. My parents had told themselves they owned it because they lived there. They had repeated the lie so many times that it had become their truth. I looked at my mother. Mom, tell the truth. Who pays the mortgage every month? Who paid the property taxes last week? My mother sniffed and looked away. We all contribute in different ways, Sophia. You pay some bills because you are single and have no responsibilities. Marcus contributes his presence and his future. He is going to be a great leader one day. We invest in him. You should be proud to support your brother instead of being so greedy. There it was, the golden child syndrome in its purest form. My money was just a utility to them, like running water or electricity. I was not a person. I was a resource. I realized then that there was no point in arguing. You cannot use logic to fight insanity. If I showed them the deed right now, they would say it was a forgery. If I showed them the bank statements, they would say I owed them that money for raising me. Brittany stood up and walked over to me. She placed a hand on my arm. It felt cold. Look, Sophia, she said, lowering her voice like she was giving me advice. We are willing to forgive you for running away. We know you are probably going through a midlife crisis because you are over 30 and unmarried. It is hard seeing your younger brother do so well. But if you apologize to Mom and Dad and reinstate the auto draft for the bills, we will let you come to the wedding. We will even let you sit at the family table. She paused for effect. But you need to apologize now, and you need to sign a check for the renovation costs. The contractors are coming tomorrow to tear down that wall in your office. I looked at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. She really believed she had the power here. She really believed this was her house. I gently removed her hand from my arm as if it were a piece of lint. I looked at my parents. So you are sticking to that story, that this is your house, that Marcus bought it? Absolutely, my father said. Get out of my house, Sophia. If you are not here to help, then get out. Do not come back until you are ready to be a dutiful daughter. I nodded. Okay. I turned around and walked to the door. Wait, Marcus yelled. Where are the credit cards? You didn't unfreeze them. I did not answer. I walked out into the humid Atlanta air. I did not get my hard drive, but I got something better. I got their final undeniable refusal to face reality. I climbed into the back of the waiting town car. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the house. It looked sturdy. It looked permanent. But I knew something they did not. I knew that without my payments, the foundation was made of sand. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted messaging app I used with my lawyer, Harrison. I typed a message that I had written in my head 1,000 times but never had the heart to send. They claimed ownership in front of a witness. They denied the lease agreement. They are hostile. I took a deep breath. Activate Plan B. Immediate eviction proceedings. Sale to third-party investor. Harrison replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. I put the phone down and watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. Brittany wanted to renovate. She was about to find out that it is very hard to renovate a house when the sheriff is putting padlocks on the doors. Plan B was not just about taking the house back. Plan B was about selling it. I had already lined up a buyer, a developer who wanted to bulldoze the property to build modern townhomes. My parents were not just going to lose their home. They were going to watch it get flattened. And the best part? The notification for the missed mortgage payment was scheduled to hit my father's email in exactly 10 minutes. Let the games begin. The following weekend, I drove back to the house on Maplewood Drive, not because I wanted to, but because I had received a notification from my security system that the alarm to my home office had been disabled. I had not authorized that. My home office was the one room in that house I kept locked. It contained client files, my server, and thousands of dollars in reference materials. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a moving truck parked behind my father's leased sedan. It was not a professional moving company. It was a rental trailer attached to a pickup truck that belonged to one of Brittany's friends. They were hauling boxes inside, pink boxes. I walked through the front door and the smell hit me instantly. Sage. Burning sage. The scent of performative spirituality was choking out the smell of my father's old cigars. "Mom," I called out, my voice echoing in the foyer. "Why is my office alarm disabled?" My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked annoyed to see me not guilty. "Lower your voice, Sophia," she hissed, pointing up the stairs. "Brittany is meditating. She is very stressed with the wedding planning and she needs absolute quiet." I stared at her. "You let her into my office. She needed a space," my mother said, shrugging as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "The guest room is full of boxes. The den is where your father watches his programs. Your office was just sitting there gathering dust. It is selfish to keep a whole room locked up when family needs it." I walked past her and took the stairs 2 at a time. My heart was pounding against my ribs. It was not fear, it was a protective rage. That office was where I built my career. That office was where I spent nights studying for my CPA exams while my friends were out partying. That office was the engine that paid for the roof over their heads. I reached the landing and saw the door to my office wide open. Brittany was standing in the center of the room. She was wearing designer yoga pants and a crop top, holding a bundle of smoking sage. But that was not what made my blood run cold. It was the hallway. Lined up against the baseboards were stacks of my books. My forensic accounting textbooks. My leather-bound legal encyclopedias. My framed degrees. They were sitting on the floor like garbage waiting to be taken out. And inside the room, my mahogany desk, the one I bought with my first big bonus, was pushed into the corner. In its place was a ring light and a tripod. Brittany turned and smiled at me. "Oh, hey, Sophia. I did not hear you come in. We are just clearing out the negative energy. This room has such heavy vibes, very corporate, very stagnant." I looked at my books on the floor. "Brittany, those are not heavy vibes. Those are my credentials. That is my property." She rolled her eyes and waved the sage stick in the air. "You are so materialistic. I need a space for my wellness live streams. I have over 5,000 followers, Sophia. This is my career. I cannot film in the basement. The lighting is terrible." My mother appeared behind me, panting slightly from the stairs. "Sophia, stop making a scene," my mother said, placing a hand on my shoulder to hold me back. "Brittany is going to be living here now. This is her home too. You need to learn to share. You do not even live here anymore. You made that very clear when you ran off to the Caribbean." I looked from my mother to Brittany. The audacity was suffocating. "So you are kicking me out of my own office?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low. "We are repurposing it," my mother corrected. "For the bride. It is just for a few months until they find their own place. Be the bigger person, Sophia. Stop being so petty about a room you hardly use." Hardly use. I used it to pay their bills. I used it to ensure they had heat and electricity. Brittany kicked a box of my files with her bare foot. It slid across the hardwood floor and hit the wall with a thud. "Besides," Brittany said, inspecting her nails, "we are going to paint over this awful navy blue. I want a soft beige, something that pops on camera, and we are going to knock out that wall to open up the space. The contractor comes tomorrow." I watched her kick the box. I watched the way she looked at my diplomas with disdain. In that moment, I had a choice. I could fight, I could scream, I could drag my desk back to the center of the room and throw her ring light out the window. But then I remembered Plan B. I remembered that the eviction notice was being processed by the courts. I remembered that I had already spoken to a real estate developer who was interested in the land value. If Brittany wanted to renovate the house, let her. If she wanted to spend money painting walls and tearing down partitions, let her. Every dollar she spent on this house was a dollar she was donating to me. Because when I sold the house, I would be selling it with her improvements. She was essentially paying to increase my property value right before I kicked her out. It was the ultimate forensic accounting plot twist. She was creating an asset for me while creating a liability for herself. I took a deep breath and let my shoulders drop. I forced my face to relax. I channeled every ounce of professional detachment I possessed. You know what I said, smoothing down my blazer? You are right. Brittany blinked, surprised. I am. Yes, I said, stepping back. I have been holding on to the past. This room is just things. If you need it for your career, then you should have it. My mother let out a loud sigh of relief. Thank you, Jesus. Finally, you are acting like a sister. I looked at the pile of books on the floor. I will send movers to collect my things tomorrow. Do whatever you want with the room. Paint it, knock down the walls, install a skylight if you want. Brittany clapped her hands together, squealing. Oh my God, really? That is amazing. I have so many ideas. We are going to do imported bamboo flooring and a soundproof glass door. It sounded expensive. It sounded very expensive. I turned to leave, but then I stopped at the doorway. I looked back at Brittany, who was already visualizing her bamboo floors. Just one thing, I said. Yeah, she asked, distracted. I am not paying for any of it, I said clearly. Not the paint, not the contractor, not the floors. If you want to renovate, you pay for it yourselves. Brittany laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. She looked at my mother, and they shared a conspiratorial look. A look that said she thinks she has power, but she doesn't. Brittany turned back to me with a smirk that was pure venom. Don't worry about it, Sophia, she said dismissively, waving her hand at me as if I were the help. Nobody is asking for your little pennies. Mom and Dad said they are covering the renovation costs as a wedding gift. They want their daughter-in-law to be happy. My mother nodded, beaming with pride. Exactly. We take care of family Sophia. We will handle the bill. I stood there for a second, processing what she just said. Mom and Dad were going to pay. Mom and Dad who had zero savings. Mom and Dad whose mortgage payment I had just canceled. Mom and Dad who were currently living on borrowed time and borrowed credit. They were going to drain their emergency fund, the tiny sliver of money they had left from my grandfather's life insurance, to renovate a room in a house they did not own for a girl who despised them. It was perfect. It was tragic. And it was absolutely hilarious. Good luck with that, I said. I walked down the stairs listening to them giggle about paint swatches. I walked out the front door and got into my car. As I drove away, I called my lawyer, Harrison. Change of plans? I said into the Bluetooth. Let the eviction process drag out for exactly 3 more weeks. Harrison sounded confused. Why? I thought you wanted them out yesterday. I did, I said, watching the house disappear in my rearview mirror. But the tenant is making significant capital improvements to the property at her own expense. I want to wait until the bamboo floors are installed before we change the locks. Harrison laughed. You are cold, Sophia. I am not cold, I said, merging onto the highway. I am just prioritizing my assets. I hung up the phone. Brittany wanted a renovation. I was going to give her an eviction. But first I was going to let her spend every last dime she had making my property beautiful for the next owner. Little did I know that in her quest to find the money for those bamboo floors, Brittany was about to do something much worse than just ask my parents. She was about to commit a federal crime that would drag my brother down with her, and she was going to use my name to do it. The sound of a sledgehammer hitting drywall is distinct. It is a violent hollow thud that reverberates through the floorboards and settles in your teeth. On Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock sharp, that sound woke the entire neighborhood. I stood in the hallway of the house on Maplewood Drive, a cup of black coffee in my hand, and watched as three men in coveralls began to destroy the office I had built with my own money. Brittany was standing in the center of the chaos wearing a hard hat that looked like it had been bedazzled with rhinestones. She was pointing and shouting instructions at the foreman, a man named Giovanni, who charged $300 an hour just for a consultation. "Careful with the molding," Brittany screamed over the noise of the demolition. "We want to preserve the vintage aesthetic but open up the flow. I need the chi to circulate." I took a sip of my coffee and watched a large chunk of plaster fall from the wall. That plaster was original to the house. Behind it was the insulation I had paid to upgrade 3 years ago to keep the heating bills down. Now it was being ripped out and stuffed into heavy-duty trash bags. My father was standing next to me. He looked pale. He was holding his checkbook in his hand, like it was a fragile bird he was afraid to crush. "Are you sure this is necessary?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the saw that had just started up. $50,000 is a lot of money, Clara. That is the last of the liquidity from the retirement fund." My mother patted his arm dismissively. "Oh, stop worrying, David. It is an investment. Brittany says this studio will add at least $100,000 to the home value. Plus, she needs this for her career. You want to support her career, don't you?" My father sighed and opened the checkbook. I watched him write the date. His hand was shaking slightly. I knew exactly what that $50,000 represented. It was their safety net. It was the money for their prescriptions, their car insurance, and the property taxes they thought they were paying, but I had been covering. Once that check cleared, they would be financially naked. I pulled out my phone. I did not step in to stop my father. I did not grab the pen from his hand. Instead, I opened my camera app. I took a photo of the sledgehammer going through the drywall. I took a photo of the exposed electrical wiring that the workers were yanking on carelessly. I took a photo of the pile of debris accumulating on the hardwood floors I had refinished last year. Brittany noticed me taking pictures. She pulled down her dust mask and smirked. "Taking notes, Sophia. Maybe you can use these for your vision board. This is what it looks like when people actually have style." I smiled calmly. "Actually, I am just documenting the changes. It is fascinating to watch." I did not tell her that I was documenting evidence for a civil lawsuit. In legal terms, what she was doing was called waste. It is the permanent destruction of real property by a tenant or someone in possession of land that prejudices the owner's interest. Since Nemesis Holdings, LLC, owned the land, and I owned Nemesis Holdings, Brittany was essentially documenting her own crime for me. The foreman Giovanni walked over to my father. He was a large man who smelled of sawdust and expensive cologne. "Mr. Jenkins, I need that deposit now," Giovanni said, holding out a callous hand. "Materials are on the truck. We do not unload until the check clears." My father ripped the check out of the book. The sound of the paper tearing was louder to me than the sledgehammers. He handed over $50,000. "There you go," my father said, his voice weak. "Please just make it look nice." I felt a pang of pity in my chest, but I shoved it down. Pity is a luxury I could no longer afford. They had made their choice. They chose the girl who broke a nail over the daughter who paid the mortgage. The morning dragged on. The dust in the air became a thick, white fog. I went to the kitchen to pour more coffee, trying to ignore the sound of my legacy being dismantled. Suddenly the noise stopped. The saws cut out. The hammering ceased. Then I heard Giovanni shouting, "Whoa, whoa, stop! Cut the water main! Cut it now!" I walked back to the hallway. The workers were backing away from the hole they had punched in the wall. A dark, foul-smelling liquid was spraying out of a pipe, soaking the exposed insulation and pooling rapidly on the floor. Giovanni turned to my father, wiping grease from his forehead. "We have a problem, Mr. Jenkins. Big problem. You have got cast-iron pipes behind this wall. They are completely corroded. The vibration from the demo caused a rupture." My mother gasped. Well, fix it. Just patch it up. Giovanni shook his head. I cannot patch this, lady. This is rot. If I patch this, it bursts next week and floods the whole basement. We have to rip out the entire line and replace it with PVC. And we have to bring in a mold remediation team because looking at this insulation, you have got black mold spreading into the ventilation. My father looked like he was going to vomit. How much? Giovanni pulled out a calculator and tapped a few buttons. Emergency plumbing mold remediation code upgrades. You are looking at another $20,000. Minimum. And I need it up front, because I have to pull emergency permits. The room went silent. The only sound was the dripping of the sewage water onto my hardwood floors. 20,000, my father whispered. We do not have 20,000. We just gave you everything we had. Giovanni crossed his arms. Then I pack up my guys and leave. But I cannot leave the water on. I have to shut off the main to the whole house. You will have no running water until this is fixed. Brittany let out a shriek. No running water. Are you kidding me? I have a hair appointment tonight. I need to shower. My mother turned slowly to look at me. Her eyes were wide, desperate. She looked at my designer bag. She looked at my calm face. She remembered the years I had silently fixed every problem, paid every bill, smoothed over every crisis. Sophia, she said, her voice trembling. Sophia, baby. You have savings. I know you do. You just went to St. Lucia first class. I took a sip of my coffee. It was getting cold. My father turned to me too. Sophia, this is a crisis. We have no water. The house is falling apart. Please, write him a check. We will pay you back when Marcus's crypto investments pay out. I looked at the puddle of dirty water expanding toward my shoes. I looked at the hole in the wall. I looked at Brittany, who was looking at me not with gratitude but with expectation, as if it were my duty to save her renovation. I thought about the birthday dinner. I thought about the text message. You are not our priority right now. I took a step back to avoid the water. I am sorry, I said, keeping my voice steady and devoid of emotion. I cannot help you. What do you mean you cannot? My mother screamed. You are rich. You have the money. I do have the money, I agreed. I have plenty of money. But my money has a strict budget. And right now, fixing a plumbing disaster caused by an unauthorized renovation for a sister-in-law who hates me, that is not in the budget. Sophia, my father yelled. This is your home too. No, I corrected him. It is not. You made that very clear. I am just a guest here. And as a guest, I think I will check out before the smell gets worse. I turned to Giovanni. You might want to get that check cashed quickly, sir, before they try to stop payment on it. Sophia, don't you dare walk away. My mother wailed, grabbing at my arm. I pulled away sharply. You told me I wasn't your priority, I said, looking her dead in the eye. Well, guess what, Mom? Your plumbing is not my priority. I walked out the front door, leaving them standing in the dark, waterless hallway. As I walked to my car, I heard Brittany screaming at my father to do something. I heard my mother crying. I got into my car and locked the doors. I pulled up my banking app. I transferred another $10,000 into my vacation fund. Then I called the city inspector. I knew Giovanni was cutting corners. He hadn't pulled a permit for the initial demo. A quick anonymous tip about unpermitted work and a sewage leak would ensure that the city came out and condemned the property within 24 hours. If they thought living without water was bad, wait until they tried living with a red tag on the front door. I put the car in drive. The bridge wasn't just burned. I had just detonated the pilings. And the best part was the explosion was going to look like a tragic accident. But Marcus was not going to let this slide. Desperate people do desperate things. And with the wedding deposit due and the house crumbling, my brother was about to cross a line that you can never uncross. He was about to try and become me. 3 days after I left my parents standing in a pool of sewage water inside a house they could no longer afford, I received a package at my office. It was not a legal notice or a bill. It was a box wrapped in cream-colored silk ribbon. Inside sat a wedding invitation that probably cost more than my first car. The cardstock was so thick it felt like a piece of drywall. The lettering was engraved in gold leaf. It smelled faintly of lavender and desperation. I ran my fingers over the raised text, reading the names of the happy couple: Brittany Ann Miller and Marcus James Jenkins. Below their names was the traditional listing of the wedding party and the hosts. The parents of the bride were listed in a font size that screamed, "Look at us, we are wealthy." The parents of the groom, David and Clara Jenkins, were listed right below them. I scanned the rest of the card. I looked for my name. Usually in a wedding of this magnitude, the siblings of the groom are listed as bridesmaids or groomsmen, or at the very least, honored guests. I turned the card over. I checked the separate reception card. I even checked the RSVP envelope. My name was nowhere. I was the sister of the groom. I was the financial backbone of the family. I was the reason Marcus even had a suit to wear in his engagement photos. But on this piece of paper, which would be mailed to 300 of Atlanta's elite, I did not exist. I sat back in my leather executive chair and swiveled to look out the window. It was a masterclass in erasure. They were not just cutting me out of their lives, they were rewriting history to make it look like Marcus was an only child, a singular golden heir to a non-existent fortune. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Jenkins, your brother is here to see you. He says it is urgent. I told my assistant to send him in." I did not stand up when Marcus walked into my office. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, likely caused by the stress of living in a house with no running water, and a red tag from the city inspector taped to the front door. He sat down opposite me and saw the invitation on my desk. He winced. "So you got it," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I picked up the heavy cardstock and flicked it with my fingernail. It made a sharp, expensive sound. "It is beautiful, Marcus," I said, my voice completely neutral. "Very heavy, gold leaf. This must have cost at least $50 a unit." "Did you use the plumbing money for this?" Marcus shifted in his chair. "Look, Sophia, we need to talk about the invitation. I know you probably noticed your name is missing from the wedding party list." I raised an eyebrow. "I did notice that. I assumed it was a printing error." "It is not an error," Marcus said quickly. "It was a creative decision." Brittany and her mom sat down with the wedding planner, and they decided to go with a streamlined aesthetic. They felt that having too many names on the card looked cluttered. "Cluttered," I repeated. "So my name is Clutter." Marcus sighed, a long-suffering sound that implied I was being difficult. "It is not like that, Sophia. You have to understand, Brittany is very sensitive right now. She feels a little intimidated by you. You have this big career and this intimidating energy. She is worried that if you are in the wedding party or listed as a host, you might unintentionally overshadow her. It is her day, Sophia. She wants to be the only star." I stared at him. "I tried to process the level of narcissism required to tell your sister, who paid your rent for 5 years, that she cannot be in your wedding because she is too successful. So let me get this straight," I said, leaning forward. "I am not in the wedding party because I am too successful." Marcus nodded, seemingly relieved that I understood. "Exactly. You get it. You have always been the strong one. Brittany is delicate. She needs the spotlight. We knew you would be cool about it because you do not care about superficial stuff like weddings anyway." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope. "But we definitely want you there," he said, forcing a smile. "Here is your seating assignment. We wanted to give it to you personally, so you did not think we forgot you." I opened the small envelope. Inside was a place card. Table 19. I looked at the venue map included in the invitation packet. The head table was table 1. The family tables were 2 and 3. The important guests were 4 through 10. Table 19 was located in the back corner next to the kitchen entrance and the emergency exit. "You put me at the overflow table," I said, looking up at him. "Who else is at table 19, Marcus?" He looked away. Just some of Brittany's distant cousins from Idaho. And her dad's old college roommate. You will like them. They are very down to earth. So, I am not family, I said. I am a guest. A guest who sits by the kitchen door. Marcus stood up, clearly eager to leave now that the deed was done. Come on, Sophia, do not make a big deal out of this. You are still invited. You can still come and eat the food and drink the champagne. Just try to blend in, okay? Do not wear anything too flashy. Brittany asked if you could wear beige or gray so you do not clash with the bridesmaids. Beige or gray. He wanted me to fade into the wallpaper. He wanted me to be invisible. I stood up then and walked around the desk. I stood right in front of him. I was wearing a tailored red suit that cost more than his car. I was vibrant. I was powerful. And he was terrified of me. I understand, Marcus, I said, smiling, a smile that should have warned him to run. I completely understand. Brittany wants to be the star. She wants me to be a guest. Exactly, Marcus said, backing toward the door. I knew you would get it. You are the best. I am the best, I agreed. And Marcus, do not worry about me overshadowing anyone. I will sit at table 19. I will wear gray. I will be the quietest guest you have ever seen. He exhaled a breath he had been holding. Thanks, Sophia, really. And hey, about the water at the house. I held up a hand. Not a priority, Marcus. Go home to your bride. He left my office looking like he had just dodged a bullet. He had no idea he had just walked directly into the path of a missile. I picked up the invitation again. I looked at the date. The wedding was in 2 weeks. They wanted me to be a guest. They wanted me to be an outsider. They wanted to strip me of my title as sister and daughter so they could feel comfortable in their delusion of grandeur. Fine. If I was a guest, then I did not owe them family loyalty. If I was a guest, then I was not obligated to protect their secrets. If I was a guest, then my gift did not have to be sentimental. A guest brings a gift that reflects their relationship to the couple. And my relationship to this couple was that of a creditor to a debtor. I opened my laptop and pulled up the foreclosure timeline. The final notice of default had been processed. The eviction team was on standby. I picked up my phone and called Harrison. Harrison, I said, my voice light and airy. I need you to expedite the filing. I want the sheriff to serve the final eviction notice on the day of the wedding. Harrison paused. On the wedding day, Sophia. That is brutal. No, Harrison, I said, looking at the gold leaf invitation that treated me like a stranger. It is not brutal. It is a gift. They want a memorable wedding. I am going to give them a reception they will never forget. I hung up the phone and looked at the seating chart one last time. Table 19. The table by the exit. It was actually perfect. Because when the chaos started, I would be the first one out the door. But before the wedding could happen, Marcus was going to make one last fatal error. Desperate for cash to pay for the venue that required a final deposit, and unable to ask me for help, he was about to do something that would turn this from a civil dispute into a criminal investigation. And he was going to use my identity to do it. The foreclosure notice was not the only piece of paper destined to ruin my family's week. While I was busy expediting the legal proceedings to reclaim my property, Brittany and her mother were busy finalizing the wedding details that would drive my brother to a felony. It started at a brunch meeting that I, of course, was not invited to. I know what happened because the restaurant Le Jardin has excellent acoustics, and the table next to them was occupied by one of my junior auditors, who was recording the conversation on her phone per my instructions. Brittany's mother, a woman named Patricia, who wore pearls to the gym, slammed a glossy brochure onto the table. She looked at my father, whose face was gray with financial terror. David, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. We simply cannot have the reception at the country club. It is too pedestrian. Brittany deserves the Biltmore estate. We need the grand ballroom. We need the rolling hills. It is the only venue that speaks to the caliber of this union. My father cleared his throat. He had just spent $70,000 on a plumbing disaster and a renovation for a house he did not own. He was bleeding cash. "The Biltmore is beautiful, Patricia," my father stammered. "But the deposit alone is significant." "It is $100,000, Patricia said, taking a sip of her mimosa. "And it is due this Friday to secure the date. We are paying for the dress and the flowers, David. The groom's family handles the venue and the alcohol. That is tradition. Unless, of course, you are having liquidity problems." She raised an eyebrow. That was the trigger. My parents would rather die than admit they were broke. They would rather jump off a cliff than let the Millers think they were less than wealthy. "Of course not," my mother chimed in, her laugh shrill and nervous. "Money is not an issue. David will write the check on Friday. We just want Brittany to be happy." My auditor told me that my father looked like he was having a silent heart attack. He nodded weakly. "Friday. Yes, Friday is fine." They left the brunch with a promise to pay $100,000 in 48 hours. They had, by my estimation, maybe $3,000 left in their checking account. When they got back to the house on Maplewood Drive, the panic set in. I watched it unfold later on the cloud server from the hidden camera I had installed inside the smoke detector of my home office years ago. I had never removed it, and since Brittany was too busy looking at herself in the ring light to check for security devices, it remained my silent witness. The footage showed my father pacing around the half-demolished room. He was sweating. "Clara, we are dead," he whispered. "We are absolutely dead. I cannot write that check. It will bounce. We have tapped out the retirement fund. We have maxed out the credit cards that Sophia did not freeze. We have nothing." My mother sat on a stack of drywall, holding her head in her hands. "Call Sophia. Beg her. Tell her it is for the family reputation." "I called her 10 times, David," my father shouted. "She blocked me. She blocked all of us. The girl is ice. She does not care if we are humiliated." That is when Marcus walked in. He was holding a beer, looking agitated. He had heard the news about the Biltmore deposit. He knew that if this wedding did not happen at the venue Brittany wanted, she would leave him. And if she left him, he would have to admit to the world that he was not a crypto genius, but an unemployed man-child living with his parents. "We cannot let Patricia know we are broke," Marcus said, his eyes darting around the room. "She will pull the plug. Brittany will leave me. I need this wedding, Dad." "Then find $100,000, Marcus," my father snapped. "Because unless you have a secret Bitcoin wallet you haven't told us about, we are finished." Marcus stared at the floor. Then his eyes drifted to the corner of the room. The renovation workers had moved my old file cabinet there, intending to throw it out the next day. It was a heavy, locked steel cabinet where I used to keep my old tax returns and personal documents from before I moved out. Marcus walked over to it. He grabbed a crowbar that the construction crew had left lying on the floor. "What are you doing?" my mother asked. Marcus didn't answer. He jammed the crowbar into the seam of the drawer and pulled. The metal screeched. It was a violent, desperate sound. The lock popped with a snap. He yanked the drawer open. He started rifling through the hanging folders. "Marcus, stop that. Those are Sophia's private papers," my father said. But he did not move to stop him. He just watched, paralyzed by his own desperation. "Found it," Marcus whispered. He pulled out a manila folder labeled Taxes 2018 to 2020. He opened it and pulled out a 1040 form. He stared at it like it was a treasure map. "What is it?" my mother asked, standing up. "It is her tax return," Marcus said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It has everything, Mom. Her full legal name, her date of birth, her current address, and right here at the top, her social security number." The room went silent. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Marcus turned to his parents. His eyes were bright with a manic energy. "Sophia has impeccable credit," he said quickly. "Her score is over 800. She has millions in unused credit lines. I remember she told me once about this ultra-exclusive black card she was pre-approved for. The limit is basically infinite." My father shook his head. Marcus, no. That is fraud. That is identity theft. You cannot do that to your sister. Is it theft? Marcus argued, stepping closer to them. Or is it just a loan? A family loan. Look, we use her information to apply for the card online. Instant approval. We get the digital card number immediately. We pay the deposit for the Biltmore on Friday. Then when my crypto investments bounce back next month, I pay off the balance and close the card. She will never even know. He was lying to himself. His crypto investments were worth zero. He was never going to pay it back. My father looked at the floor. He looked at the water-damaged ceiling. He looked at his wife. David, my mother whispered. It is just a temporary measure. Sophia has so much. She just went to St. Lucia on a whim. She spends more on handbags than we do on groceries. She won't even feel it. But it is illegal, Clara, my father said weakly. It is survival, my mother countered. She walked over to Marcus and looked at the tax return. She ran her finger over my social security number. She abandoned us, David, my mother said, her voice hardening. She left us with no water. She embarrassed us at the restaurant. She owes us this. After everything we sacrificed to raise her, to put up with her coldness, she owes us a wedding. She looked at Marcus and nodded. Do it, she said. Do it quickly before the construction crew comes back. Marcus grinned. He pulled out his phone and started typing. I watched on the camera feed as he entered my name, my birthday, and the 9 digits that identified me to the federal government. He was not just stealing money. He was stealing my identity. He was gambling my financial reputation on a wedding reception for a woman who despised him. I sat in my office miles away watching the footage recorded hours earlier. I could have stopped the application. I could have called the credit bureau right then and flagged it. But I didn't. I watched him hit submit. I saw him pump his fist in the air as the screen likely flashed approved. I leaned back in my chair. A forensic accountant does not interrupt a crime in progress if she wants to build a RICO case. She lets the suspect hang himself. Marcus had just handed me the one thing better than a foreclosure. He had handed me a felony conviction. He thought he had solved his problem. He had no idea he had just signed his own arrest warrant. And the best part was, I was going to let him spend the money first. I was going to let him book the venue. I was going to let him invite the world. Because the higher the climb, the harder the fall. The vibration of my phone on the mahogany desk was subtle, but to a woman who spends her life anticipating disaster, it sounded like a gunshot. It was Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of analyzing a forensic audit for a pharmaceutical company, looking for hidden offshore accounts, but my eyes instantly darted to the screen. It was a notification from my credit monitoring service. Alert. New credit inquiry detected. American Express Platinum. I froze. I have an American Express Platinum card. I have had one for 5 years. I did not apply for a new one. I picked up the phone and unlocked the app. My heart rate remained steady. Panic is for amateurs. In my line of work, panic causes errors, and errors destroy evidence. I tapped on the notification to expand the details. The application was submitted 2 minutes ago. The applicant used my full name, Sophia Marie Jenkins. They used my date of birth. They used my social security number. But they listed the billing address as 42 Maplewood Drive, my parents' house, and they listed the contact email as marcus.jenkins.crypto@gmail.com. I stared at the screen. The sheer stupidity was almost insulting. My brother Marcus was trying to commit identity theft, and he used his own email address on the application form. He was not even a good criminal. He was a lazy one. Most people in this situation would call the bank immediately. They would scream fraud. They would shut down the application before it could be approved. They would protect their credit score at all costs. But I am not most people. I am a forensic accountant who had just been disowned by her family over a plumbing bill. I looked at the status of the application. Pending review. The bank's algorithm had likely flagged the address discrepancy since my actual billing address is my penthouse in Midtown, not the house in the suburbs. I sat there and thought about the last week. I thought about Brittany throwing my books into the hallway. I thought about my mother screaming that I was selfish. I thought about the wedding invitation that listed me as a guest at table 19. If I blocked this application now, Marcus would just claim it was a misunderstanding. He would say he clicked the wrong box. He would say he was trying to add himself as an authorized user and got confused. It would be a family squabble. But if the card was approved, and if he used it, that is not a misunderstanding. That is wire fraud. That is aggravated identity theft. That is a federal felony that carries a mandatory minimum prison sentence. I picked up my office landline and dialed the number for American Express verification. I did not call the fraud line. I called the new accounts line. "Good afternoon, this is Sarah. How can I help you today?" the operator asked. "Hi Sarah, this is Sophia Jenkins," I said, keeping my voice smooth and professional. "I just submitted an application for a new platinum card, but I realized I might have triggered a security alert because I used my family home address instead of my city residence. I am currently traveling and I needed to make sure the digital card gets provisioned to my Apple Pay immediately for a large transaction today." I verified my security questions. I gave her my mother's maiden name. I gave her the name of my first pet. "Oh, I see it here, Ms. Jenkins," Sarah said. "Yes, the address mismatch flagged it. Since you verified the info, I can push this through for you right now. You should see the digital card in your wallet in about 2 minutes." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "You have been very helpful." I hung up the phone. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I had just handed my brother a loaded gun. Now I just had to wait for him to pull the trigger. I turned back to my computer screens, but I could not focus on the pharmaceutical audit. I kept my banking app open on my iPad. I watched the screen like a hawk watching a field mouse. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then the notification popped up. Transaction approved. The Biltmore estate. $30,000. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. He did it. He actually did it. He used a card in my name to pay the deposit for a wedding venue I was barely invited to. $30,000 is not a small theft. In the state of Georgia, theft by taking over $25,000 is a felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. But a bank notification is just digital data. A defense attorney could argue that Marcus had verbal permission. They could argue that I gave him the card number. They could argue entrapment. I needed more. I needed undeniable physical proof that Marcus Jenkins was the one who authorized that transaction. I needed to see him holding the pen. I needed to see him smiling as he signed my name. I opened my contact list and scrolled down to R. Reynolds. Reynolds was a private investigator I used for corporate cases. He was expensive, discreet, and he could find a needle in a haystack in the dark. I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. "Jenkins, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Reynolds asked. "I have a job for you," I said. "It is personal. I am listening." "I need you to go to the Biltmore estate right now," I said. "My brother Marcus is there meeting with the event coordinators. He just paid a $30,000 deposit. I need video footage of him interacting with the staff. I need you to get a clear shot of him signing the contract. And if possible, I need you to get audio of him claiming to be the payer." Reynolds whistled low. 30 grand. He is playing with the big boys now. "Is this for the foreclosure case?" "No," I said, staring at the transaction on my screen. "This is for the criminal case." I heard the sound of keys jingling on Reynolds' end. "I am on my way. I will have the footage on your secure server by tonight." I hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the window of my office. The Atlanta skyline was stretched out before me, glittering in the afternoon sun. Somewhere down there in the rolling hills of the Biltmore, my brother was popping champagne. He was probably hugging Brittany. He was probably telling my parents that his crypto investments had finally paid off and that he was the savior of the family. He was celebrating his own funeral. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I should be sad. I should be heartbroken that my baby brother, the boy I used to help with his homework, was stealing from me. But the sadness had burned away days ago, leaving only clarity. They wanted a wedding. They wanted a show. They wanted luxury. I was going to give them exactly what they paid for. I sat back down at my desk and opened a new file on my computer. I labeled it United States versus Marcus Jenkins. I dragged the screenshot of the credit inquiry into the folder. I dragged the screenshot of the approved transaction into the folder. Then I waited for Reynolds to send me the final nail for the coffin. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Marcus. "Hey Sophia, just wanted to say sorry again about the invite mix-up. Hope you are not too mad. By the way things are looking up. Just closed a big deal. Dinner is on me next time." I stared at the lie. Closed a big deal. He meant he closed a deal with my credit rating. I typed back. "Congrats, Marcus. I am sure you will get exactly what you deserve." I hit send. He replied with a heart emoji. I looked at the heart emoji and felt nothing. He had stolen my identity to pay for a party where I was seated by the kitchen door. The hunter in me settled in. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the wedding day to spring it. And when I did, I would not be the only one watching. The sheriff of Fulton County would be my +1. The house on Maplewood Drive smelled of fresh paint and old lies. It was Friday evening, and my parents were hosting an intimate dinner for Brittany's parents, the Millers, to celebrate the securing of the wedding venue. To the untrained eye, the house looked immaculate. The hole in the wall from the plumbing disaster had been hastily patched and painted over in a soft beige that Brittany claimed was calming. But I knew better. I knew that behind that fresh coat of paint, the drywall was still damp, and the pipes were ticking time bombs because my father had hired a handyman off Craigslist, instead of a licensed plumber, to fix the catastrophe. I arrived precisely 7 minutes late, wearing a charcoal gray dress that blended perfectly into the shadows just as requested. I was the ghost at the feast. I was the invisible banker funding a lifestyle that did not belong to me. When I walked into the dining room, the table was set with the good china, the Wedgwood pattern, that my mother usually kept locked in the break front for fear of chipping. Tonight, however, she was risking the porcelain to impress Patricia and Robert Miller. Patricia Miller was a woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and judged people by the knot in their silk scarves. She was sitting to the right of my father holding a crystal wine glass and looking around the room with an expression of critical approval. "It is lovely what you have done with the place, Clara," Patricia said, her voice tinkling like wind chimes. "Brittany told us about the little renovation project. It is so generous of you to let the kids customize the space before they move to their own estate." My mother beamed, clutching her napkin as if it were a lifeline. "Oh, you know us, Patricia. We believe in giving the children strong roots. This house has been in the family for years, and we want Marcus and Brittany to feel that stability." I took a sip of my wine. Stability. The only thing stable about this house was the lien I held against it. Marcus was sitting at the head of the table where my father usually sat. He was wearing a new suit. I recognized the cut. It was Italian. It likely cost $2,000. And given that his bank account was currently overdrawn, I knew exactly whose credit card had paid for it. He caught my eye and quickly looked away, focusing intensely on his roasted chicken. He was sweating. A thin sheen of perspiration glistened on his forehead, despite the air conditioning blasting at full power. Robert Miller, a man who had made his fortune in commercial real estate, cleared his throat and raised his glass. "I would like to propose a toast," he rumbled. "To Marcus. I have to admit, son, when Brittany first brought you home, I was skeptical. We have always wanted the best for our girl, but seeing how you stepped up this week has truly impressed me." My father stiffened. He knew what was coming. Robert continued. "Patricia told me about the deposit for the Biltmore. That is not a small sum. Most young men your age are still paying off student loans or asking their parents for handouts. But you put down $30,000 without blinking an eye. That shows character. That shows financial maturity." He clinked his glass against Marcus's. "To the provider." The table erupted in a chorus of "hear, hear." My mother clapped the loudest, her eyes shining with tears of relief. She looked at Marcus with genuine adoration, completely forgetting that the money he spent was stolen from the daughter she was currently ignoring. "Oh, Marcus has always been a wizard with numbers," my mother gushed. "Just like his father. He made some very smart investments in the technology sector early on. We are just so proud of his independence. I set my wine glass down. The sound was soft, but in the silence that followed the toast, it felt heavy. That is impressive, Marcus, I said, my voice smooth and low. Technology sector, you say? I would love to hear which specific asset class performed so well for you this week. Was it crypto, or perhaps something more identity-based? Marcus choked on his wine. He coughed violently, reaching for water while Brittany pounded him on the back. Oh, Sophia, stop grilling him, Brittany said, rolling her eyes at me. You are so boring with your finance talk. Marcus does not need to explain his genius to you. He just has the touch. Unlike some people who have to slave away at a desk for a salary, Marcus makes his money work for him. I smiled, a cold, predatory smile. You are right, Brittany, I said. He certainly knows how to make money work. Or at least how to make credit work. My father shot me a warning glare. His eyes pleaded with me to shut up. He was terrified that I would expose the lie right there over the roasted asparagus, but he did not understand. Exposing them now would be too easy. It would be messy. It would just look like a family argument. I wanted something more permanent. I reached down to my bag, which I had placed by my feet. I pulled out a blue legal folder. It was thick. It was heavy. On the cover in bold black letters was the logo of my law firm and the words "Confidential, do not open." I placed the folder on the empty corner of the table near the centerpiece. What is that? Patricia asked, eyeing the folder with curiosity. Did you bring work to dinner, Sophia? I smoothed my hand over the cover. Oh, this, I said casually. Just some paperwork I needed to drop off for Marcus and Dad. Since we are all here celebrating financial maturity, I thought it was appropriate. Marcus stared at the folder. He stopped chewing. He looked at the logo. He looked at me. He saw the darkness in my eyes, and for the first time that night he realized that the $30,000 he stole wasn't a windfall. It was bait. Is it a wedding gift? Brittany asked, reaching for it. I placed my hand gently on top of the folder, stopping her. Not exactly, I said. It is more of a reality check. But please do not open it now. It might spoil the digestion. It is just some boring legal documents regarding the title of the house and a few banking irregularities I found during a routine audit of my personal accounts. My father dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Banking irregularities, my father whispered, his face losing all color. Yes, I said, picking up my wine glass again. You know how strict the fraud detection algorithms are these days. If they detect a large, unauthorized transaction, say $30,000 from a location that does not match the cardholder's address, they automatically generate a criminal referral report. I just wanted Marcus to see what that report looks like. It is fascinating reading. The room went dead silent. The air conditioner hummed. Brittany looked confused. Robert looked intrigued, but Marcus and my parents looked like they were watching an executioner sharpen his blade. I stood up. I had not eaten a single bite of food. Well, I hate to eat and run, I said, smoothing down my gray dress. But I have a flight to catch. I am going back to St. Lucia for the weekend. The air here is a bit too stifling for me. I looked at Marcus one last time. Enjoy the Biltmore, Marcus. I hear the acoustics in the ballroom are amazing. You can hear a pin drop or a gavel bang. I walked toward the door, leaving the blue folder sitting there on the white tablecloth like a loaded gun. Sophia, wait! My mother called out, her voice shaking. You cannot just leave that there. What is in it? Read it, Mom, I said without turning around. It is all there in black and white. Just remember, you are the one who said Marcus was a wizard with numbers. I am just the auditor who checks the math. I walked out of the house and into the cool night air. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew exactly what would happen next. They would wait until the Millers left. They would smile and wave goodbye while their insides twisted with terror. And the second the door closed, they would tear open that folder. Inside, they would not find a letter. They would find a copy of the police report I had filed that morning. They would find a copy of the eviction filing stamped by the court clerk. And they would find a subpoena for Marcus to appear for a deposition regarding felony identity theft. I got into my car and checked my phone. My security system showed that they were still at the table, frozen in fear. The party was over. The hangover was just beginning, and Table 19 was looking better and better every second. The rehearsal dinner was held in the backyard of the house on Maplewood Drive, because the country club had mysteriously lost my father's reservation, or perhaps they had simply run his credit card and laughed. To compensate for the change in venue, my mother and Brittany had transformed the lawn into a spectacle that looked like a Pinterest board exploded. There were thousands of fairy lights strung between the oak trees and white linen tablecloths covering rented round tables. A string quartet was playing soft covers of pop songs in the corner near the tool shed. I sat at table 19, which had been placed so far back near the hydrangeas that I was practically sitting in the neighbor's yard. I wore a slate gray dress that made me look like a shadow. I sipped my iced tea and watched the performance art that was my family trying to look wealthy while standing on financial quicksand. Marcus was pacing near the buffet line, looking like a man on death row who was allergic to his last meal. He kept checking his phone, probably waiting for the fraud alert that would end his life. He avoided making eye contact with me. My parents were fluttering around the Millers, trying to keep their wine glasses full, so they would not notice that the catering staff was actually just my mother's church friends wearing black t-shirts. But the star of the show was Brittany. She wore a white cocktail dress that cost more than the plumbing repair she had demanded. She held a microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. Her face was flushed with alcohol and the absolute certainty that she had won. She had the house, she had the man, she had the wedding, and she had successfully banished me to the garden edge. She tapped the microphone and the feedback squeal made everyone wince. "Attention, everyone," she slurred slightly. "If I could just have your attention." The music stopped. The guests turned to face the makeshift stage set up on the patio. "I just want to say thank you to my amazing parents and to David and Clara for welcoming me into the Jenkins dynasty," Brittany said, beaming. "It is so rare to find a family that values tradition and legacy as much as I do." My mother wiped a tear from her eye. My father looked at his shoes. Brittany took a long sip of champagne, and her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on me in the back. Her smile sharpened. "And I also want to mention someone special. Sophia." "Where are you, Sophia?" "Oh, there you are back in the corner." She pointed at me. Every head turned. I did not move. I did not smile. I just watched. "You know, guys," Brittany continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "it has been a hard week. There was a lot of negative energy in this house. A lot of jealousy. Some people just cannot handle it when their younger siblings surpass them in life." "It is sad, really," the crowd murmured. My face remained a mask of stone, but inside my blood was boiling. She was not just content with stealing my house and my money, she wanted to destroy my character too. Brittany giggled. "I mean, imagine being over 30 and single and so bitter that you try to sabotage your own brother's happiness. Imagine refusing to help fix a plumbing leak just to be petty." "But you know what? We forgive you, Sophia. We really do. We invite you here today to show you what real love looks like. Maybe if you take notes, you might find someone to tolerate you one day too." The silence that followed was excruciating. My mother looked horrified, but she did not stop it. Marcus looked like he wanted to dissolve into the grass. The Millers looked uncomfortable but amused. Brittany raised her glass. "So here is to love, and here is to blocking out the haters." "Cheers." She drank. The guests clapped politely, but the air was thick with tension. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the patio stones was loud. I picked up my clutch and began to walk toward the stage. I did not walk fast. I walked with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a predator closing in on wounded prey. "Sophia, sit down," my father hissed as I passed him. "Don't make a scene." I ignored him. I walked up the 3 steps to the patio. Brittany looked at me, her eyes wide. She tried to pull the microphone away, but I reached out and took it from her hand. I did not snatch it. I simply took it with the authority of someone who owned the very ground she was standing on. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at the Millers. I looked at my parents. "Thank you, Brittany," I said, my voice clear and steady without a hint of slurring. That was a very moving speech. I turned to look at her. She took a step back, clutching her glass. You are right, I continued, addressing the guests. There has been a lot of energy in this house lately, a lot of changes. And I think it is important that we acknowledge the hard work that went into making this night possible. I gestured to the house behind me. The house with the fresh beige paint and the new open concept office. I want to thank Brittany specifically, I said. Most brides focus on flowers and dresses, but Brittany focused on capital improvements. She spent the last week overseeing a renovation that truly opened up the floor plan. She replaced the drywall. She updated the lighting. I paused, letting the confusion settle over the crowd. And I want to thank her for doing all of that to my house, I said. A ripple of whispers went through the yard. Brittany laughed nervously. Your house, she scoffed. You are drunk, Sophia. Sit down. This is David and Clara's house. I smiled. A cold, terrifying smile. Actually, it is not, I said. And it hasn't been for 5 years. The deed to this property is held by Nemesis Holdings LLC. And I am the sole proprietor of Nemesis Holdings. My parents have been living here as tenants. Tenants who haven't paid rent in 60 months. My mother stood up, knocking her chair over. Sophia, stop this immediately. I did not stop. And since we are sharing truths, I said, looking back at Brittany, I want to thank you for funding the renovation. I know my parents told you they paid for it, but we all know their bank accounts are empty. So the $50,000 you put into this property, that was a very generous donation to my equity. When I sell this place next week, the value will be much higher thanks to your taste in bamboo flooring. You are lying, Brittany screamed, her face turning red. You are a liar, Marcus. Tell her she is lying. I looked at Marcus. He was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face. Tell her, Marcus, I said into the microphone. Tell her whose name is on the mortgage. Tell her whose credit card you stole to pay for the Biltmore deposit because you knew you had no claim to this property. Marcus did not speak. He just sobbed. I turned back to the crowd. So enjoy the party, everyone. Drink the champagne, eat the cake. Because as of tomorrow morning, the locks will be changed. And to the happy couple, I suggest you enjoy this backyard tonight. It is the last time you will ever set foot on it. I dropped the microphone. It hit the patio stones with a deafening thud. The silence was total. No one moved. No one breathed. Brittany looked like she had been slapped. My father looked like he was having a stroke. And then in the distance, cutting through the heavy, humid air, came a sound. It started low, a wail that grew louder and louder. Then came the lights. Blue and red flashes bouncing off the trees, reflecting in the swimming pool. Everyone turned toward the driveway. A police cruiser turned onto Maplewood Drive. Then another. And another. I looked at Marcus. I think your ride is here, I said. The sirens killed the music. The party was over. But justice was just pulling into the driveway. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers were not part of Brittany's color scheme, but they illuminated the backyard with a harsh strobe effect that made everyone look like ghosts. The string quartet had already packed up their instruments and fled toward the side gate, sensing that this was no longer a gig they wanted on their resume. I stood by the hydrangeas, my clutch bag held loosely in my hand, and watched the finale of the show I had produced. 2 uniformed officers stepped out of the first vehicle, followed by a man in a beige suit who I recognized immediately. It was Sheriff Patterson. He was the head of the civil division and a man who took property rights very seriously. I had sent his office the complete file on Nemesis Holdings LLC at 9 o'clock that morning, along with a rush fee that ensured he would be the one to serve the papers personally. The crowd of guests parted like the Red Sea as Sheriff Patterson marched onto the patio. His heavy boots crunched on the expensive stone pavers. He did not look at the decorations. He did not look at the terrified guests. He looked straight at the group of people standing frozen near the wedding arch. David and Clara Jenkins. He boomed, his voice deep and authoritative, cutting through the night air. My father stepped forward, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his wine glass. It shattered on the ground, a sharp punctuation mark to his humiliation. "I am David Jenkins," he whispered. "Is there a problem, officer? We are just having a family dinner. If it is a noise complaint, we can turn the music down." Sheriff Patterson pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. It was not a noise complaint. "This is an order of immediate eviction and a cease and desist for trespassing," he said, handing the papers to my father. "The owner of this property, Nemesis Holdings LLC, has filed a formal complaint. You have been occupying this residence without a lease and without payment. You were given verbal notice to vacate. You are now being ordered to leave the premises immediately." My mother let out a strangled cry. "This is a mistake. We own this house. My son bought it for us. Tell him, Marcus. Tell him this is our home." The sheriff turned his gaze to Marcus. My brother was standing behind Brittany, trying to make himself as small as possible. He looked like a child who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Only, the cookie jar was a federal bank vault. "Are you Marcus James Jenkins?" the sheriff asked. Marcus nodded slowly, his face the color of ash. "Yes." Sheriff Patterson did not hand Marcus a piece of paper. Instead, he reached for his belt and unclipped a pair of steel handcuffs. The metallic click was the loudest sound in the world. "Marcus James Jenkins, you are under arrest," he said, stepping forward. Marcus stumbled back, knocking into the wedding cake table. "Arrest? For what? I did not do anything. You are being charged with aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, and credit card fraud in excess of $25,000, the sheriff reciting the charges with practiced boredom. "We have a warrant for your arrest based on evidence provided by the Fraud Division of American Express and the sworn affidavit of the victim, Sophia Jenkins." The gasp from the crowd was audible. It started as a low murmur and rose to a crescendo of shock. My mother threw herself between the sheriff and Marcus. "No. You cannot take him. He is getting married in 2 days. This is a misunderstanding. Sophia, tell them. Tell them you gave him permission." She spun around, scanning the darkness for me. Her eyes were wild. She looked like a cornered animal. "Sophia, please. Sophia, tell him it was a loan. Tell him you said it was okay." I stepped out of the shadows. I walked past table 19, past the terrified caterers, and stood next to the sheriff. I looked at my mother. I looked at the tears streaming down her face, the mascara running in black streaks that ruined her perfect hostess makeup. "I cannot lie to the police, Mom," I said, my voice calm and devoid of pity. "That would be obstruction of justice. And I think we have enough crimes being committed here tonight." I turned to the sheriff. "That is him, officer. That is the man who used my social security number to pay for this party." Sheriff Patterson nodded. He grabbed Marcus's wrist and spun him around. Marcus did not fight. He was too stunned. He let his hands be pulled behind his back. The handcuffs ratcheted shut. 1 click, 2 clicks. The sound seemed to snap Brittany's parents out of their trance. Patricia Miller, the woman who was so proud of her future son-in-law, let out a scream that sounded more like a shriek of rage than horror. "A criminal!" she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at Marcus. "You are arresting him! He is a criminal!" Robert Miller stepped forward, his face red with fury. He looked at my father, who was still holding the eviction notice. "You told us he was an investor," Robert shouted. "You told us he was a tech genius. You let us plan a wedding at the Biltmore with stolen money." My father tried to speak, but no words came out. He just stood there holding the paper that said he was homeless, watching his son get put into the back of a police car. Patricia grabbed Brittany's arm. Her grip was tight, aggressive. "We are leaving," she hissed, "right now." Brittany looked at Marcus, who was being led away. She looked at the house, which was no longer hers. She looked at me standing there in my gray dress, looking like the owner of the world. "But my dress," Brittany whimpered. "The wedding is on Sunday." "There is no wedding," Patricia snapped, dragging her daughter toward the driveway. "There is no house, there is no money, and there is no groom. He is going to prison, Brittany. Do you want to be a prison wife? Do you want to give birth to a felon's baby? Move your feet." Brittany looked back one last time. She looked at Marcus being shoved into the back seat of the cruiser. She saw him looking at her, pleading with his eyes for help. And then I saw the moment the love died. It did not fade slowly. It was extinguished instantly like a candle in a hurricane. Brittany hardened her face. She turned her back on him and ran toward her parents' Range Rover. "Wait!" the sheriff called out, addressing my parents. "Folks, I need you off the property now. My officers will supervise you while you grab essential items, medicine and a change of clothes only. Everything else stays until the civil asset forfeiture team clears the house." My mother collapsed onto the patio stones, wailing. "Where will we go? We have nowhere to go." I watched as the miller's Range Rover peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching, leaving black marks on the pavement. They did not look back. They were escaping a sinking ship, and they were taking the only lifeboat. My father looked at me. His eyes were empty. He looked old. "Sophia," he whispered, "please, just for tonight, let us stay, just until we figure this out." I looked at the house. My house. The house I had paid for. The house they had barred me from. I checked my watch. "You have 10 minutes, I said, turning to walk away. "After that, the sheriff locks the gate. I suggest you grab your coats. The forecast says it is going to be a cold night." I walked toward my own car, my heels clicking on the stone. Behind me, I heard the chaos of a life falling apart. I heard the police radio chatter. I heard my mother sobbing. I heard the silence of a wedding that would never happen. I got into my driver's seat and started the engine. I did not feel guilty. I felt light. I had cut the anchor. As I drove past the police cruiser, I saw Marcus in the back seat. He was pressing his forehead against the glass. He saw me. He mouthed something. It looked like "I am sorry." I put on my sunglasses even though it was night. It was too late for apologies. The bank was closed, the credit line was revoked, and the bill had finally come due. But the story wasn't over yet. Marcus was going to jail, but he wasn't going to go down quietly. In his desperation to save himself, he was about to reveal a family secret that even I did not know. A secret about the money my grandfather left behind, and why my parents had been so desperate to keep me under their thumb all these years. The silence that followed the departure of the police cruiser was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb crater right after the explosion. My brother Marcus was gone en route to the county jail, where he would be processed, fingerprinted, and stripped of his Italian suit. But in the backyard of the house on Maplewood Drive, the wreckage of my family remained. My mother Clara apparently decided that the reality of the situation was too difficult to process without an audience, so she resorted to her favorite defensive maneuver. She let out a gasp that sounded suspiciously like a deflating balloon, clutched her chest with a hand that still held a diamond ring I had paid for, and collapsed onto the damp grass. It was a performance worthy of a daytime Emmy. She fluttered her eyelids and let her head loll back, waiting for someone to rush to her side. Usually this was the part where my father would panic and scream for water. Usually this was the part where I would step in to check her vitals. But tonight nobody moved. Sheriff Patterson looked down at her with the exhausted expression of a man who had seen every trick in the book. He did not call for paramedics. He nudged the toe of his boot against her shoe. "Ma'am, get up," the sheriff said, his voice flat. "You are not having a heart attack. You are having an eviction, and you are wasting your 10 minutes. My father David was standing over her, but he wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at the driveway, where the miller's Range Rover was still idling. Brittany had not gotten into the car yet. She had broken free from her mother's grip and was storming back toward the patio. Her white cocktail dress was stained with grass and dirt. Her mascara was smeared across her face like war paint. She did not look at Marcus's empty chair. She did not look at my mother on the ground. She marched straight up to my father. "You told me you paid for it!" Brittany screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You told me the $50,000 was a gift. That was my money. That was my savings." My father held up his hands, trembling. "Brittany, please, not now. Marcus just got arrested." I do not care about Marcus, she shrieked, grabbing the lapels of my father's jacket. He is a fraud. You are all frauds. I want my money back. Write me a check right now. I am not leaving until I get my $50,000 for the renovation. My father laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. Brittany, look around you. We are being thrown out. I do not have $50, let alone 50,000. It is gone. The plumbing, the walls, the Biltmore deposit. It is all gone. Brittany stared at him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had invested everything she had into a family that was bankrupt. She let out a primal scream of frustration, shoved my father backward into the buffet table, and turned around. She ran back to her parents' car, sobbing not for the loss of love, but for the loss of liquidity. The Range Rover sped away, leaving my parents alone with the law. My mother, realizing that no one was buying her fainting act, sat up. She looked around the yard. The guests were gone. The musicians were gone. The caterers were packing up the silverware with aggressive speed, clearly worried they wouldn't get paid. Sheriff Patterson checked his watch. "You have 8 minutes remaining," he announced. "My deputies will escort you inside to grab essentials. 1 bag each. No furniture, no electronics, no valuables. Just clothes and medication. Move." I watched them scramble. It was pathetic. My mother, who always preached about dignity and class, was now running into the house to shove her fur coats into a black garbage bag. My father was trying to grab his golf clubs, but a deputy stopped him, reminding him that sporting goods were not essential for survival. I decided it was time for my final inspection. I walked past them, entering the house through the French doors. I walked through the kitchen where the unwashed dishes from the prep work were piled high. I walked up the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister I had polished so many times as a child. I walked down the hallway to my old office. The door was gone, removed by Brittany's contractor. The walls were half demolished. The bamboo flooring she had screamed about was stacked in the corner, uninstalled. I stepped over a pile of drywall dust and walked out onto the small balcony that overlooked the backyard. It was my favorite spot in the house. From here you could see everything. I looked down. My parents were standing on the driveway. They looked small. They were holding 2 bulging trash bags each. They looked like refugees from a life they had destroyed with their own hands. They looked up and saw me. The moonlight caught the gray fabric of my dress, making me look like a statue. "Sophia," my mother cried out, dropping her bag. "Sophia, please, open the door. Tell them to stop. We have nowhere to go. It is late. It is cold." My father looked up too, his eyes pleading. "We are your parents, Sophia. You cannot do this. We made a mistake. We are sorry. Just let us stay for one night. We can fix this in the morning." I leaned against the railing. I held a glass of wine I had poured from the kitchen on my way up. I took a slow sip. "Fix it?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly in the night air. "How do you plan to fix a felony, Dad? How do you plan to fix years of using me?" "We will pay you back," my mother sobbed. "We promise." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "You have nothing to pay me with. You spent it all on appearances. You spent it all on a son who is currently being booked for fraud." I swirled the wine in my glass. "Do you remember my birthday dinner?" I asked. They went silent. "Do you remember the text you sent me?" I continued. "You said I wasn't your priority right now. You said you had to take Brittany to the spa because she broke a nail. Sophia, that was just stress," my mother pleaded. "We didn't mean it." "I think you did," I said. "You meant every word." And I listened. I finally listened to you. I stopped trying to buy your love. I stopped trying to be the good daughter. I adjusted my priorities. I took another sip of wine. And right now, my priority is securing my property. I pulled a small remote control from my pocket. It was the master control for the electronic gate at the end of the driveway. I had installed it 3 years ago for their security. "Please," my father whispered. "No. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad," I said. I pressed the button. The heavy iron gates at the end of the driveway began to swing shut. My parents turned and ran toward them, dragging their garbage bags across the asphalt, but they were too far away. The deputies who had been waiting by their cruisers stepped aside to let them pass, then blocked the entrance once they were on the street. My parents stood on the public sidewalk. The gate clicked shut with a final metallic sound that echoed like a prison door. They were locked out. I stood on the balcony and watched. I watched my mother pound her fists against the iron bars. I watched my father sit down on the curb and put his head in his hands. Behind them, the neighbors were starting to come out onto their porches. The same neighbors my mother had tried so hard to impress for 30 years. They were watching the Jenkins family hit rock bottom. I turned around and walked back into the house. I set my wine glass down on the mantelpiece. The house was quiet. The toxic energy was gone. The parasites had been removed. I walked to the front door and keyed in the new security code. I locked the deadbolt. I was alone in a house that was half destroyed, surrounded by the wreckage of a wedding that never happened. But for the first time in my life, the air in the house felt clean. I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. Marcus was in jail. My parents were on the street. Brittany was gone. But there was still the matter of the family secret. The secret Marcus had hinted at before he was dragged away. The secret about my grandfather's will. I dialed the number of the family attorney, a man who had been retired for years, but who I knew held the original copies of every document my grandfather had ever signed. It was time to find out what else they had stolen from me. Because if I knew my family, the bottom of this rabbit hole wasn't just dirty, it was deep. And I was going to dig until I hit the truth, no matter who else had to get buried in the process. The Fulton County Superior Court smells of floor wax and stale coffee. It is a smell I usually associate with victory because in my line of work, the courtroom is where I expose fraud and reclaim stolen assets. But today the smell was different. It smelled of a family rotting from the inside out. I sat in the front row of the gallery directly behind the prosecutor. I was wearing a black suit, sharp and tailored, the kind of armor a woman wears when she is about to watch her own bloodline be severed by the gavel of justice. My lawyer, Harrison, sat next to me, scrolling through his iPad with the bored detachment of a man who charges $600 an hour. Across the aisle, my parents sat huddled together on a wooden bench. In just 48 hours, they had aged 10 years. My mother, Clara, was not wearing her usual Sunday best. She was wearing a wrinkled tracksuit, likely pulled from the one garbage bag she was allowed to take from the house. My father, David, looked like a ghost, his eyes hollow and red-rimmed, staring fixedly at the door where prisoners entered. When the bailiff announced the arrival of the defendant, my mother let out a small, broken whimper. Marcus walked in. He was not wearing the Italian suit he had stolen my identity to buy. He was wearing a bright orange county jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hands were cuffed to his waist. He looked at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. The arrogance, the golden child energy, the belief that he was destined for greatness had all been stripped away, leaving only a terrified 28-year-old man who had gambled his life on a lie and lost. Before the judge entered, my father stood up and shuffled across the aisle. He stopped in front of me. He did not look angry anymore. He looked defeated. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Please, it is not too late. You can tell the prosecutor you made a mistake. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding. If he gets a felony record, his life is over. He will never get a job in finance. He will never be able to rent an apartment." I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had stood by while my books were thrown in the hallway. The man who had demanded I pay for a renovation I did not want. His life was over the moment he decided to steal from me, Dad, I said, keeping my voice low so the bailiff would not intervene. I did not put him in that jumpsuit. He put himself there. "But he is your brother," my mother hissed, leaning over the bench. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It means I know exactly who he is," I replied. "And I know exactly who taught him that it was okay to take things that do not belong to him." All rise. The Honorable Judge Reynolds took the bench. She was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and zero tolerance for nonsense. She looked at the file in front of her, then looked down at Marcus. Mr. Jenkins, you are charged with 1 count of aggravated identity theft and 1 count of wire fraud. How do you plead? Marcus's public defender stood up. Your Honor, my client pleads guilty. However, we would like to offer a statement in mitigation during sentencing. We believe there are extenuating circumstances regarding the family dynamic that led to this unfortunate event. I watched the lawyer weave a tale of confusion. He spoke about a miscommunication between siblings. He suggested that Marcus believed he had implied permission to use the funds because I had supported the family in the past. He tried to paint me as an absent sister who had cut off support without warning, forcing a desperate brother to make a bad choice to save his parents' dignity. It was a good story. It almost sounded plausible. Then the prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, the state rejects the notion of a misunderstanding. We have evidence that this was a calculated conspiracy to defraud the victim, Sophia Jenkins. And we would like to submit into evidence a voicemail recovered from the defendant's phone sent by his mother, Clara Jenkins, on the day of the crime. My mother gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She had forgotten. In her arrogance, she had forgotten that digital footprints are eternal. The prosecutor pressed a button on his laptop. The audio echoed through the silent courtroom. It was my mother's voice, clear and sharp. Marcus, just do it. She owes us this wedding. Use the old tax return in the file cabinet. She has so much money she will never even notice. Just get the deposit paid before Brittany leaves you. We will figure out how to hide it later. The recording ended. The silence in the room was heavy. The judge looked at my mother, who was now shrinking into her seat, trying to make herself invisible. Then the judge looked at Marcus. Mr. Jenkins, the judge said, her voice dripping with disdain. This was not a misunderstanding. This was theft, pure and simple. You stole from the only person in your family who was actually working to support you. You bit the hand that fed you, and now you are asking for mercy because you are hungry. Marcus began to sob. I am sorry, Your Honor. I am sorry, Sophia. I just wanted the wedding. Judge Reynolds shook her head. I am sentencing you to 3 years of probation. You will perform 500 hours of community service. And you will pay restitution to the victim in the amount of $30,000 plus legal fees. Furthermore, because of the nature of this crime involving financial fraud, you are hereby barred from holding any position involving the handling of money or sensitive financial data for the duration of your sentence. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Barred from finance. That was the real death sentence. Marcus had a degree in business, but with a fraud conviction on his record, he would be lucky to get a job stocking shelves at a grocery store. His career, his reputation, his future as a CEO, it was all gone. My parents watched in horror as the bailiff led Marcus away to process his release paperwork. He would be going home with a criminal record that would follow him forever. But the day was not over. As we walked out of the courtroom, my parents tried to approach me again. My mother was crying hysterically now, muttering about how I had destroyed the family. But before they could reach me, a man in a cheap suit stepped in front of them. He was holding a stack of papers. David and Clara Jenkins, he asked. Yes, my father said, wiping his eyes. Who are you? I am a process server for the Fulton County Bankruptcy Court, the man said, handing them a thick envelope. Your creditors have filed an involuntary petition for liquidation. Since you have defaulted on your credit cards, your car leases, and the personal loans you took out against your future inheritance, the banks are moving to seize your remaining assets. My father looked in the papers. His hands shook so hard he dropped them. Assets, he whispered. We do not have any assets. We lost the house. We lost the retirement fund. The process server shrugged. Then they will garnish your wages. And since I see here that you are both retired, they will be looking at your Social Security checks. Good luck, folks. I stood by the elevator and watched. It was the final domino. For years they had lived a lie. They lived in a house they did not own, driving cars they could not afford, throwing parties with money they did not have. And I was the glue that held that illusion together. I was the one who paid the mortgage. I was the one who paid the credit card bills. I was the one who kept the wolves at the door. When they told me I wasn't a priority, they didn't just hurt my feelings. They fired their financial manager. I stepped into the elevator. The doors began to close. My parents were standing in the hallway holding the bankruptcy papers, looking small and old and terrified. They looked at me, and for the first time I saw them clearly. They weren't monsters. They were just parasites who had finally killed their host and realized too late that they could not survive on their own. I pressed the button for the lobby. I had one more stop to make. The family attorney. Because while Marcus was crying in his cell and my parents were reading about their bankruptcy, I had a feeling that the betrayal went even deeper than stolen credit cards. My grandfather Theodore had left a legacy, and I was beginning to suspect that my parents had stolen more than just my childhood. They had stolen my birthright. As the elevator descended, I checked my phone. A notification popped up from Brittany. She was suing Marcus for emotional distress. I smiled. The circle of life was complete. But as I walked out into the sunlight, I knew the real war was just beginning. Because what I was about to find in my grandfather's will would make $30,000 look like pocket change. It would change everything I thought I knew about why my family hated me. And it would give me the power to bury them, not just financially, but permanently. The audacity of a narcissist is a renewable resource that never seems to run out. Just 3 days after my brother was sentenced for felony fraud, and my parents were served with bankruptcy papers, I received a special delivery at my office. It was not a thank you note for not pressing charges against my parents. It was a lawsuit. Brittany Miller, the woman who had fled the scene of her own wedding disaster, leaving tire marks on the pavement, was suing me. I sat in my conference room and read the complaint with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Brittany was suing me for $50,000 in renovation costs, claiming unjust enrichment. She was also suing me for $200,000 for intentional infliction of emotional distress, loss of reputation, and the pain and suffering caused by the cancellation of her nuptials. She claimed that I had maliciously lured her into investing in the property by concealing my ownership. She claimed that I had waited until the last possible moment to reveal the truth in order to maximize her humiliation. She painted herself as the innocent victim of a vengeful sister-in-law who was jealous of her youth and beauty. I handed the document to Harrison, my lawyer. He read it and let out a low whistle. "She has a lot of nerve, I will give her that," Harrison said, tossing the papers onto the mahogany table. "But she has made a fatal error." "What is that?" I asked, pouring myself a sparkling water. "She admitted to the renovations," Harrison said, tapping the page. "Right here in paragraph 4. She admits that she ordered the demolition of the wall and the removal of the original fixtures. She admits she hired the contractor." I smiled. "Exactly. In the legal world, there is a concept called waste. It refers to the unauthorized destruction or alteration of real property by a tenant or someone in possession of the land. By admitting she ordered the construction, Brittany wasn't proving she invested in my house. She was proving she vandalized it. We did not settle. We did not offer mediation. We went straight to civil court. The courtroom was smaller than the one where Marcus was sentenced, but the tension was just as high. Brittany arrived wearing a pale pink dress and a cardigan, trying to look like a delicate flower crushed by the weight of my cruelty. Her mother Patricia sat in the front row, glaring at me with eyes that could cut glass. Brittany took the stand first. Her lawyer, a man who looked like he chased ambulances for a living, asked her to describe the trauma of that night. "It was horrible," Brittany sobbed, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "I put my heart and soul into that house. I spent my life savings, my entire nest egg, to make it beautiful for my new family. And Sophia just stood there and laughed at me. She let me spend the money, and then she stole the house. She ruined my wedding. She ruined my life." The judge, a pragmatic man named Judge Henderson, looked bored. He had seen 1,000 property disputes, and he did not seem impressed by her tears. When it was Harrison's turn to cross-examine, he did not ask about her feelings. He asked about the paperwork. Ms. Miller, Harrison asked, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Did you at any point sign a contract with Nemesis Holdings LLC authorizing these renovations? Brittany blinked. No. I thought David and Clara owned the house. Did you check the deed? Harrison pressed. Did you pull the title report before investing $50,000 into a property you did not own? No, Brittany snapped. Who does that? It was family. Harrison nodded. And are you aware that the contractor you hired caused catastrophic damage to the plumbing system, resulting in a sewage leak that required $20,000 in emergency repairs? Brittany shifted in her seat. That was an accident. Old pipes. Harrison pulled out a photo. It was the photo I had taken on the morning of the demolition. It showed the workers ripping out the insulation with reckless abandon. This does not look like an accident, Harrison said. This looks like negligence. This looks like unauthorized destruction of property. You tore down a load-bearing wall without a permit. You flooded the basement. You left the house in a state of disrepair that significantly lowered its market value. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defendant counter-sues for the cost of restoring the property to its original condition. We estimate the damages to be $75,000, including the plumbing repair, the mold remediation, and the reconstruction of the office wall. Brittany's face went pale. The math was happening in her head. She was suing for $50,000. I was countersuing for $75,000. If she lost, she would be in the hole for an amount she definitely did not have. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. I have heard enough. The plaintiff's claim for unjust enrichment is dismissed. You cannot claim enrichment when you conduct unauthorized work that damages the structure of a home you do not own. Ignorance of the title is not a defense. As for the emotional distress claim, the court finds that Ms. Jenkins was within her legal rights to evict squatters from her property. Exercising one's property rights is not outrageous conduct. Brittany let out a gasp. But my money! The judge continued, ignoring her. Regarding the countersuit, the court finds in favor of the defendant, Ms. Jenkins. Ms. Miller, you admitted under oath to ordering the demolition. You are liable for the damages. You are ordered to pay $75,000 to Nemesis Holdings LLC plus legal fees. The gavel banged. Brittany sat there stunned. She looked at her mother. Patricia looked away, refusing to make eye contact. The Millers were wealthy, but they were liquid poor. They lived on credit and appearances just like my parents. $75,000 was a check they could not write. I walked out of the courtroom feeling a sense of absolute closure. I did not want her money. I knew I would probably never see a dime of it. But the judgment was a permanent mark on her record. It was a financial shackle that would follow her just as Marcus's felony would follow him. Outside on the courthouse steps, the reality set in for Brittany. She was on the phone screaming at someone. I paused, pretending to check my email just to listen. I cannot believe this, she screamed into her phone. I have to pay her. I have to pay that witch. I have no money left. I have to sell the Range Rover. I have to sell my bags. She paused, listening to the voice on the other end. No, Marcus, she yelled suddenly. I do not care that you are sorry. I do not care that you are lonely in jail. This is your fault. You told me you bought the house. You told me you were rich. You are a loser, Marcus. A broke felon loser. Do not call me again. Do not write me. We are done. She hung up the phone and threw it into her purse. She looked up and saw me standing there. Her eyes narrowed with hate, but behind the hate was fear. She knew now what my family had learned too late. I was not someone to be trifled with. I walked past her toward my car. Nice dress, Brittany, I said without stopping. It looks very affordable. She did not say a word. She just stood there defeated, watching me drive away in my paid-off luxury sedan while she tried to figure out how to take the bus home. I drove straight to the office of the family attorney. The lawsuits were over. The criminal cases were closed. The extraneous drama was finished. Now it was time for the main event. I parked my car and walked into the quiet, dusty office of Mr. Abernathy. He was the man who had written my grandfather's will 20 years ago. He was the keeper of the secrets. I sat down in the leather chair opposite his desk. "Mr. Abernathy," I said, getting straight to the point. "I want to see the original trust documents. Not the ones my parents showed me when I turned 18. I want to see the ones grandfather signed before he died." Mr. Abernathy looked nervous. He adjusted his glasses. "Sophia, those files are sealed. Your parents are the trustees. You are not supposed to see them until you turn 35. I leaned forward. "My parents are bankrupt, Mr. Abernathy. My brother is a felon, and I am the forensic accountant who is about to tear your filing system apart if you do not hand over those papers right now." He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. He opened his drawer and pulled out a key. He walked to the safe in the corner of the room. He pulled out a thick leather binder. It smelled of old paper and betrayal. He handed it to me. I opened it. I read the first page, and then I read the second. My hands began to shake not from fear, but from rage. It wasn't just a house. It wasn't just a college fund. My grandfather hadn't just left me a warehouse. He had left me an empire. And for the last 10 years, my parents had been stealing millions of dollars that legally belonged to me. The $30,000 Marcus stole. That was nothing. That was a rounding error compared to what I was looking at now. I closed the binder. "I am going to need a bigger lawsuit," I whispered. I picked up the phone and called Harrison. "Do not go home yet," I said. "We are going to need the FBI for this one." Because this wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. This was massive generational embezzlement. And I was about to send my parents to a place where they wouldn't have to worry about paying a mortgage ever again. The ink on the closing documents was still wet when the wire transfer hit my account. $1,200,000. I stared at the receipt on the polished mahogany conference table of the title company. It was a beautiful number. It was a number that represented justice. The real estate agent, a perky woman named Brenda, who had no idea about the toxic history of the property, beamed at me. "You were so smart to do those renovations right before listing," she gushed, handing me a bottle of celebratory champagne. "That open concept office and the bamboo flooring really drove up the bidding war. We got 50,000 over asking price just because of the modern finishes." I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. "Thank you, Brenda," I said, taking the bottle. "I cannot take all the credit. I had a very motivated tenant who wanted to leave her mark on the property. I did not tell her that the tenant was currently living in her parents' basement minus a Range Rover and a fiancé. I did not tell her that the renovations were paid for by a lawsuit judgment I had won against that tenant. In the end, Brittany had been right about one thing. She had added value to the house. She just didn't realize she was adding it to my bank account. I walked out of the title company and into the bright Atlanta afternoon. The air felt different. It was lighter. The humidity that usually clings to the city felt manageable today. I got into my car and drove toward Midtown. I was not going back to my old condo. I had sold that too. I was heading to my new address. The Sovereign. The tallest residential building in the city. The penthouse was on the 45th floor. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a wall of glass that framed the entire city skyline. From here, the cars looked like toys, and the people were invisible specks. It was quiet. It was pristine. The furniture was white leather and chrome. There was no dust. There were no old family photos hiding lies. There was only the future. I walked to the kitchen island and set down the champagne. I did not open it yet. Instead, I opened a bottle of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, the same wine I had ordered on my birthday night. The night everything changed. I poured a glass and walked out onto the balcony. The wind whipped my hair, but I did not mind. I looked down at the sprawling suburbs in the distance. Somewhere out there in the maze of strip malls and budget motels, my parents were starting their new life. A life of bankruptcy hearings and bus schedules. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't sadness. It was the absence of weight. For 32 years, I had carried them. I had carried their expectations, their debts, their emotional baggage. I had been their retirement plan, their emergency fund, and their punching bag. And now I was just Sophia. My phone buzzed on the railing. I looked down. It was a text message from an unknown number. I usually ignore unknown numbers, but something told me to look. The preview popped up on the screen. Sophia, it is Dad. We are using a prepaid phone. We are at the Motel 6 off the interstate. The heat is broken in the room and your mother is coughing. It is so cold. We have no money for food. Please. We are your parents. You made your point. Can you just send us $50? Just for a heater and some soup. Please. I stared at the words. We are your parents. They used that phrase like a magic spell. They thought biology was a lifetime contract that obligated me to endure abuse. They thought that because they gave me life, I owed them my life in return. I thought about the night of the rehearsal dinner. I thought about my mother stepping over me to comfort Brittany. I thought about my father writing a check for $50,000 to a contractor while telling me he couldn't pay me back. I thought about the text message that started it all. You are not our priority right now. I took a sip of the wine. It was rich and complex with notes of dark cherry and oak. It tasted like victory. I did not feel anger anymore. Anger requires energy. Anger implies that you still care enough to be upset. I felt nothing but a cool, professional detachment. They were a bad investment that had been liquidated. They were a liability that had been written off. I swiped left on the message. Delete conversation. Confirm. The message vanished. The number was blocked. I looked back out at the city. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the skyscrapers. The lights of the city were starting to flicker on, one by one, creating a sea of stars below me. I raised my glass to the horizon. To priorities, I whispered to the empty, beautiful silence. I took a long, slow drink. My priority was no longer fixing broken people. My priority was no longer buying love that should have been free. My priority was standing on this balcony, breathing this air, and knowing that everything I owned, every single dollar, every single square foot of this penthouse belonged to me. I had adjusted my priorities, and for the first time in my life, I was at the top of the list. I turned around and walked back inside, closing the glass door behind me. The sound of the wind cut off instantly, replaced by the hum of the high-end climate control system. I sat down on the white sofa and picked up my tablet. I had a meeting tomorrow with the FBI regarding the trust fund embezzlement. But that was business. And business could wait until morning. Tonight, I was going to enjoy the silence. The screen fades to black. The hardest lesson I had to learn was that shared DNA is not a binding contract for endless forgiveness. For years, I measured my worth by how much I could give, thinking my financial support would eventually buy their love. But when they told me I wasn't a priority, they inadvertently set me free. I realized that setting boundaries isn't an act of betrayal. It's an act of self-preservation. You cannot build a healthy future on a foundation of disrespect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away and adjust your own priorities. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it is okay to choose yourself over toxic family members. You are not alone.